The flashes from the cameras were merciless that afternoon. Every question was a bullet, every headline a wound. Adrian Cole, the youngest millionaire in the city's tech empire, stood in front of a sea of microphones, his jaw locked and his eyes colder than the storm of reporters closing in. The scandal had hit faster than he could silence it. A leaked video, a rumor that he paid a woman to keep quiet. The public called him a manipulator. The board called him a liability. When the press conference ended, he walked through the back corridor of the hotel, his lawyer following closely behind. "You need to act now," the lawyer said, his voice low and tense. "The investors are panicking. You must prove stability and image of commitment. A wife would calm the storm." Adrian stopped walking. "A wife," he repeated. "You want me to fake a marriage?" "Not forever," the lawyer insisted. 6 months, just long enough to fix your reputation." Adrian's silence was his only answer. That same evening in a small newsroom across town, Maya Lee was deleting hate comments from her latest article, a piece that exposed corporate hypocrisy in the tech world. She was sharp, honest, and unafraid to burn bridges for the truth. She had written about men like Adrian Cole for years, powerful, untouchable, until they were not. When her editor walked over with a raised brow and said, "Cole Industries is offering an exclusive interview. They want you," she almost laughed. "Me, after everything I have written about him. They said you are the only journalist they trust." The editor said, half skeptical, half impressed. 2 hours later, she stood in the glass elevator of the Cole Tower, watching the city shrink but beneath her feet. The 42nd floor opened into a world of quiet wealth, black marble, soft jazz, and Adrian Cole waiting by the window, the sunset burning behind him. He turned as she approached. "Miss Lee, thank you for coming." She crossed her arms. "You called me here for an interview or an apology?" "Neither," he said, sliding a folder across the table between them. "A proposal." She frowned. "Excuse me, I need a wife," he said simply. "Temporarily. On paper only. It will protect both of us. You get access to my story for your next feature uncensored. I get the credibility of marrying someone the world respects." Maya stared at him, half in disbelief, half in curiosity. "You want to fix your image by marrying the woman who calls you everything wrong with capitalism?" His mouth curved slightly. "That is exactly why it will work." She looked down at the document. 6 months, confidential, mutually beneficial, no personal involvement. It was precise, clinical, like a business deal. She closed the folder and met his gaze. "If this is a joke, Mr. Cole, it is a bad one." "It is not," he said quietly. "And if you say yes, you can write whatever truth you find." Maya hesitated. The journalist in her wanted to say no. The woman who needed funding for her late father's foundation wanted to say yes. But something else, curiosity, maybe made her stay seated. Finally she said, "You want me to pretend to be your wife? Fine, but I have 3 conditions." His brows lifted. "Conditions?" She leaned forward, her voice steady and clear. 1, you do not fall in love with me. 2, you do not control me. 3, you do not lie to me. For the first time that day, Adrian's mask of confidence cracked into a faint smile. "You are the first person to negotiate with me like that." "That is because I'm not for sale," she replied. He extended his hand. "Then we have an agreement." She looked at his hand for a long moment before shaking it. His grip was firm, deliberate, almost symbolic. As their hands met, the air between them shifted, as if the contract they were about to sign would change more than either of them realized. When Maya left the tower that night, the city lights reflected off the wet pavement, and her reflection stared back at her through the glass doors. For the first time, she wondered if she had just made the most brilliant decision of her career, or the most dangerous mistake of her life. Because sometimes power is not in who writes the rules, but in who dares to break them. If you believe that every rule in love is made to be tested, stay with me. Now let us go back to her Maya Lee, the woman who wrote the contract that would change both their lives forever. Morning light poured into Maya's apartment, brushing against stacks of papers and half-empty coffee cups. She had barely slept. The contract lay open on her kitchen table, its legal language as cold and sharp as the man who had written it. The 3 rules she had added were circled in red ink. No love, no control, no lies. She reread them again and again, asking herself why she had agreed to any of this. The truth was uncomfortable part, curiosity part, challenge, and part of her need to prove that she could stay in control in a world built by men like Adrian Cole. When her phone buzzed, she expected doubt to whisper run. Instead, the message said, car downstairs, 9 a.m. sharp, AC. At exactly 9, a black car waited outside. The driver opened the door wordless. Maya took one last look at her reflection in the glass door before stepping inside. The city rolled past in silence until they reached the Cole residence, a penthouse perched above the skyline, where even the clouds seemed to pause before entering. Adrian met her at the elevator. No tie today, just a gray shirt rolled at the sleeves, the quiet confidence of someone used to being obeyed. "You are early," he said. "Journalists value punctuality," she replied. "Millionaires value efficiency," he said, leading her toward the private lounge where a lawyer waited with the contract printed on thick cream paper. The lawyer began, "This marriage will be legally recognized for 6 months. Afterward, both parties will part ways with no financial claim." Maya interrupted. "And my 3 rules." Adrian looked at her, his expression unreadable. "They are included. You have my word." She held his gaze. "I prefer ink to promises." He nodded, signing his name first. She followed her pen steady, though her heart thudded hard enough for her to hear it. When it was done, the lawyer left and silence filled the room. Adrian poured 2 glasses of water and handed her one. "Congratulations, Mrs. Cole. Do not call me that," she said. "This is not real." "Everything is real until it ends," he said. "You will move in here tomorrow. My staff will handle the paperwork. We have a charity event this weekend. You will need something formal." She raised a brow. "Are you giving me wardrobe instructions already?" "That sounds like control." He smiled slightly. "You are welcome to buy whatever you want. I will send the card details." Her tone stayed cool. "I make my own money." "I did not say you could not," he said, his voice softening. "Just making sure you do not have to." For a fleeting second, something about his tone disarmed her. Then she caught herself. "You are already breaking the rules, Miss Cole." He tilted his head. "Which one?" "The one about control," she said, walking toward the elevator. "You might be the one who signs the checks, but I am the one who writes the story." When the doors closed behind her, Adrian exhaled slowly, a rare uncertainty flickering across his face. He had built empires by predicting people, yet this woman was a question he could not solve. That night, Maya sat on her couch staring at the city lights through her window. Her phone buzzed again, an email from Adrian's assistant listing her new security details, events, and schedules. At the bottom of the message was one short line written by Adrian himself. "Rule 4. Try not to hate me too quickly." She smiled despite herself shaking her head. Too late. But deep down she knew that was not true. Hate required indifference, and she was anything but indifferent. The next day moved fast. Cameras followed her as she entered Cole Tower, again now introduced as the wife of the youngest self-made millionaire in the country. Reporters shouted questions about romance and betrayal. She answered, none. Adrian walked beside her, steady, unreadable, his hand resting briefly at her back as they entered the elevator. It was a small gesture, but she noticed how it lingered just long enough to feel human. Inside the elevator, she said quietly, "You should be careful, Mr. Cole. Pretending to care looks a lot like the real thing." He turned towards her eyes, calm but searching. "Then maybe you should be careful too, Miss Lee. Pretending not to care looks exactly the same." The elevator doors opened to the 42nd floor, and the performance began. Cameras, smiles, handshakes, all for show. But beneath the lights and the lies, something unspoken moved between them, subtle but undeniable. As they left the crowd that evening, Maya caught their reflection in the mirrored hallway, 2 strangers walking in step, bound by the deal neither fully understood. In her mind she repeated her own rule. No love, no control, no lies. But even as she said it, one truth became harder to ignore. The first rule was already shaking. If you believe that even the strongest heart can bend when tested, stay with me. Now let us return to him. Adrian Cole, the millionaire who thought he could control everything, except the one woman who refused to be controlled. By the end of the first week, the contract had turned into a routine neither of them expected. Every morning, Maya woke up to the sound of the city humming far below the glass walls of Adrian's penthouse. The space was sleek and quiet, full of silver and marble, the kind of place where even the air smelled expensive. But to her, it also felt strangely hollow, like a house that had forgotten how to be a home. Adrian kept his word about one thing: he gave her freedom. She worked on her laptop in the open living room, surrounded by coffee mugs and notes for her upcoming article about corporate ethics. He never interfered. Sometimes he would walk by, glancing at her screen, curious but silent. The unspoken tension between them was like static, always present, never released. On the third morning, she caught him in the kitchen, struggling to make coffee. The sight of a Millionaire CEO squinting at a French press almost made her laugh. "You are doing it wrong," she said. He looked up, brow raised. "Is there a wrong way to make coffee?" "Yes," she said, taking the press from his hands. "When you treat it like a stock report." He watched as she poured the water, her movements practiced and calm. The smell filled the room. For a second she caught him staring, not at the coffee, but at her, like he was seeing something he had not expected to find here. "Do you ever stop analyzing people?" she asked, handing him the mug. He smiled faintly. "Only when they stop surprising me." Her eyes met his, for a moment longer than they should have. Then she turned back to her laptop. "Do not get used to this. Tomorrow you can make your own." That evening, the charity gala arrived, the first public event of their agreement. Maya had chosen her dress herself, simple, but elegant, deep emerald against her skin. When she stepped out of the car, flashbulbs exploded like fireworks. Adrian extended his hand. Ready, she took it. The touch firm and deliberate. For the cameras, yes. Inside, the ballroom glittered under golden lights. They moved together, easily, rehearsed but seamless. To the world, they looked like the perfect couple, the reformed billionaire and the intelligent journalist who had redeemed him. Yet beneath the surface, every smile was a negotiation, every glance a quiet test. Halfway through the evening, a reporter approached with a smirk. "Mr. Cole, is it true your marriage began as a publicity stunt?" Adrian's hand tightened slightly on Maya's waist, but before he could speak, she answered. "No stunt lasts this long under the same roof," she said smoothly. "What we have may have started with logic, but it is built on respect." The reporter faltered, caught off guard. Adrian looked at her, surprise flickering in his eyes. When the man finally walked away, Adrian leaned close and whispered, "You just saved me from another headline." She replied softly, "You are welcome, but remember my rule about lies. I said respect, not love." He smiled almost sadly. "You always draw your lines so clearly." "Someone has to," she said, turning to leave. Later that night, when they returned home, the air felt different. He loosened his tie, watching her set her shoes by the door. "You handled yourself well tonight," he said. "I handle myself well every night," she replied. He laughed quietly. "I believe that." She glanced at him, her tone cooling. "Just so you know, your charm does not work here." He walked closer, stopping just short of her. "Then why are you smiling?" She hesitated, realizing she was. "Because it annoys you." For the first time since they met, he laughed, not the practiced public kind, but something real. It startled her, that warmth beneath his usual armor. She turned, arose quickly, pretending to busy herself with her bag. When she looked back, he was standing by the window, his reflection framed against the city's glow. "Maya," he said quietly, "why did you agree to this?" She paused. "Because I wanted the truth. About me, about what power does to people," she said, "and what it takes to stay human inside it." He nodded slowly, his gaze distant. "Then maybe we are after the same thing." For a moment neither moved. The clock on the wall ticked softly, marking the fragile peace between them. She walked to her room without another word, but something in her chest felt different, unsettled, almost hopeful. In her journal that night, she wrote Day 7. "He is not who I thought he was, and that might be the most dangerous part of all. If you believe that even two people with walls can still find a window between them, stay with me." Now let us return to him, Adrian Cole, the millionaire who built an empire on logic, but was beginning to learn that the heart does not negotiate. 2 weeks into the contract, the boundaries that once felt sharp began to blur. The penthouse no longer echoed with silence. There were traces of her everywhere now, a mug left near the window, a sketchbook on the coffee table, the faint scent of her perfume mixing with the smell of coffee. He had finally learned to brew correctly. Maya noticed it too. The air between them was not just business anymore. It was rhythm and interruption, argument and laughter rules, and the temptation to break them. She tried to remind herself of the first rule, no love, but rules were easier to write than to obey. That morning, Adrian stood on a conference stage answering questions about his company's new project. The press was brutal, circling back to the scandal that had nearly destroyed him. Maya watched from the front row, pretending to take notes for her article. When one reporter asked Mr. Cole, was your marriage as part of a publicity stunt, the room tensed. Adrian hesitated, then looked straight at Maya. It started as a misunderstanding, he said, his voice steady. But some mistakes bring the right people into your life. For a moment her breath caught. That was not part of the plan. When the cameras flashed, she forced a smile, but inside something shifted. The lies sounded too close to truth. After the event, she found him backstage undoing his cufflinks. You broke rule number 3, she said quietly. He looked up. Which one is that? No lies. I did not lie, he said almost gently. I said what I meant. She folded her arms. That was not the deal. He took a step closer, his tone calm but intense. Then, maybe the deal is what is broken. The space between them filled with silence heavy enough to drown in. Before she could answer, his assistant entered with urgent news. A rival company was trying to buy out one of his divisions. The crisis pulled him away, leaving her standing in the corner of the room, her pulse racing for reasons she refused to name. That night, she found herself unable to focus on her writing. She replayed his words in her mind, the way his voice softened when he spoke to her, the way his hand brushed hers when they posed for photos. None of it should matter yet. It did. Hours later, she walked into his office only to find him asleep at his desk, tie undone papers scattered across the table. The exhaustion on his face stripped away the armor he wore in public. Quietly, she placed a blanket over his shoulders. He stirred, but did not wake. For a long moment, she stood there watching him breathe, realizing that the man she had agreed to expose was more human than she wanted to admit. The next morning, he found the blanket and a note beside it in her handwriting. Do not mistake pity for kindness. Get some rest. He smiled faintly as he read it. Always in control, he murmured. Later that day, when Maya arrived in the living room, she found a small white box on the table. Inside was a fountain pen engraved with her initials. A note was attached, for the journalist who writes rules better than she follows them. She rolled her eyes but smiled. Arrogant, she muttered. Still, she placed the pen carefully beside her journal. That evening, rain poured against the tall glass windows, turning the city into a blur of silver. Adrian joined her on the couch, handing her a glass of wine. To survival, he said. She raised her glass. To contracts that still hold. They drank in silence, watching the storm outside. Then he asked quietly, What are you most afraid of, Maya? She hesitated. Losing myself. He nodded. And what if you find something better instead? She met his gaze, steady and unflinching. I do not believe in better. I believe in boundaries. He smiled slightly, almost sadly. Then maybe that is why I'm starting to believe in you. The thunder outside echoed the pulse she tried to ignore. As she turned away, her reflection appeared in the window beside his two outlines side by side, caught between the lightning and silence. In her journal that night, she wrote Day 14. He blurs the lines like he was born to cross them. I keep waiting for him to fail, but what if I am the one losing control? If you believe that even the strongest rule can break under the weight of something real, stay with me. Now let us return to her Maya Lee, the woman who built her armor out of words, but was starting to learn that some truths cannot be written, only felt. The morning after the storm, the air in the penthouse felt different. It was quieter, softer, as if the city itself had paused to listen. Maya woke earlier than usual, the sound of rain still echoing faintly in her memory. The contract hung like a shadow in her mind, but what unsettled her more was how often she had stopped thinking about it at all. Adrian was already in the kitchen, sleeves rolled, pouring coffee with the ease of habit. Good morning, he said without looking up. She leaned against the doorway, watching him. You have improved. The coffee is almost drinkable now. He smiled. Almost, I will take that as progress. She took the mug he offered and sat across from him. For a moment neither spoke. The silence between them was no longer uncomfortable. It had texture, now familiarity. She realized she had stopped waiting for him to fill it with something superficial. He had started listening instead. Later that day, she followed him to a meeting at his company's headquarters. She was there to observe, to collect notes for her eventual article about corporate integrity. But what she saw changed something inside her. When one of his board members suggested laying off hundreds of workers to cut losses, Adrian refused. He said profit means nothing if it costs people their dignity. Maya studied his face as he spoke calm, but firm, not for the cameras, not for her, but because he believed it. She had written about corruption for years, but she had never seen someone in power push back like that. After the meeting, she caught up to him in the hallway. "You know that decision will make your investors furious," she said. He glanced at her. "Then I will rebuild with people who still believe in what we do." She folded her arms. "That is reckless." "Maybe," he said, "but it is honest." She wanted to argue, but she could not. Honesty was the one language she respected most. That evening, as they rode the elevator back to the penthouse, the air between them felt charged. The soft hum of the machine filled the silence. When the doors opened, he spoke quietly. "You once said power makes people lose their humanity. Do you still believe that?" "Yes," she said, meeting his gaze. "But maybe not all people." Something flickered in his eyes, something like relief. "I will take that as progress too." For dinner, he surprised her with takeout from a small Korean restaurant she had once mentioned liking. It was a simple gesture, but it felt intimate in a way she could not name. They ate together at the kitchen island, laughing over stories from their past. His first failed pitch, her first disastrous article. When he set down his glass, his tone softened. "Maya, I need to tell you something." She looked up, wary. "If this is about breaking another rule, do not." He shook his head. "It is not a confession. It is a truth." He paused, eyes steady on hers. "You are the only person who looks at me and does not see headlines or dollar signs. You just see me." Her heart skipped once, quick and sharp. "That is because I know what it is like to be misjudged," she said quietly. The moment hung between them, fragile but electric. Then she stood, breaking eye contact. "You should get some rest. We both have long days ahead." He nodded but did not move. As she turned away, he said softly, "Rule 1, write no love." She froze, her hand tightening on the back of the chair. "Exactly. No love." In her room that night, she stared at her journal but could not write. Every word felt too small for what was happening. She was supposed to be detached, objective. But now, every time she saw him, she saw a man trying to rebuild himself one honest act at a time, and she could not look away. When she finally slept, she dreamed of the contract burning in her hands, the ink melting into his name. Across the hall, Adrian sat awake, staring at the skyline through the rain. He replayed her voice in his mind, the firmness that always hid a hint of fear. He had promised not to break her rules, but promises were easy when feelings were not real. Now they were. "If you believe that love is not always chosen but sometimes discovered, stay with me." Now let us return to him, Adrian Cole, the millionaire who had everything money could buy, except the one thing he had promised not to want. The following week brought a storm that had nothing to do with rain. Headlines appeared overnight, filled with half-truths and speculation. Journalist turned bride, did Maya Lee sell her integrity for power? The words burned across every screen. Someone had leaked their contract, twisting it into a story of manipulation and deceit. Maya found out before Adrian did. Her phone buzzed nonstop as colleagues and strangers flooded her inbox. She stared at the screen, pulse racing the air in her lungs, sharp and shallow. Every instinct she had as a journalist screamed to fight back, to defend herself publicly. But she knew one word from her could destroy him. When Adrian entered the penthouse, he was already holding the same newspaper. "You saw it," he said quietly. She turned toward him, her voice cold. "Did you?" He nodded, his jaw tight. "We will handle it. My legal team is already working on it." She crossed her arms. "Handle it. This is not a quarterly report, Adrian. They are saying I sold myself. I know," he said, trying to keep his voice even. "But the more we talk, the worse it gets. Silence will protect us. Silence will protect you," she shot back. "It will bury me." He stepped forward, his tone soft but firm. "Maya, please. I am asking you to trust me." She stared at him, searching his face for the truth. "Trust you," she said, her voice shaking. "You promise no lies. Yet someone in your company had access to that contract. Who else could have leaked it? He opened his mouth, then hesitated. That pause was all she needed. You do not know, do you? She whispered. Or worse, you do, and you are protecting them. Adrian's silence was heavy, and for the first time since they met, he looked uncertain. I cannot prove it yet, he said quietly, but I will fix this. Her eyes glistened with something sharper than anger. You cannot fix me like one of your companies. Maya, she raised her hand. No, Rule 3, no lies. You broke it. She turned away, walking toward the door, her voice breaking. And the worst part is, I almost believed you were different. He did not stop her. Maybe because he knew she needed to leave, or maybe because he was afraid that if he reached for her, she would see the truth, the guilt he carried for not protecting her sooner. That night, she packed her things and left the penthouse. Reporters waited outside, shouting her name, firing questions like arrows. She ignored them, her chin high, her heart cracking beneath every flash of light. She stayed with a friend on the other side of the city, the noise of gossip fading only slightly. Every headline felt like a betrayal. Every memory of him felt like a lie she had willingly lived inside. Yet even in her anger, she could not stop replaying his last words, trust me. 3 days passed. Then an unexpected message arrived, an anonymous tip from an internal employee at Cole Industries. It contained proof that the leak had come from one of Adrian's senior executives, a man who had been quietly selling company information to competitors. Maya's heart twisted. Adrian had been telling the truth all along. She looked at the phone, her reflection in the screen pale and tired. What have I done? She whispered. At that same moment, Adrian stood in his office surrounded by chaos. The board wanted him gone, investors demanded a statement, and his legal team urged him to shift the blame onto Maya to protect his empire. He refused. I will not destroy her to save myself, he said simply. That night, alone in his penthouse, he sat at the piano he never played. The keys were cold under his fingers, but he pressed them anyway, playing a slow, broken melody he could not name. It was the sound of regret. Meanwhile, Maya printed the documents and tucked them into a folder. She looked out the window at the city that never stopped watching. She knew what she had to do. In her notebook, she wrote one final line before closing it, day 21. I walked away because I thought he broke the rules. But maybe I was the one who stopped believing too soon. If you believe that trust is not about being sure, but about choosing someone even when you are not, stay with me. Now let us return to him, Adrian Cole, the millionaire who risked his empire for the woman who no longer believed in him. The city buzzed that evening with the sound of luxury and power. Every major investor, journalist, and politician was gathered at the annual charity auction hosted by Cole Industries. Cameras lined the marble halls, capturing flashes of wealth and reputation. It was the perfect place for redemption or ruin. Adrian stood near the stage, dressed in a black suit, his expression calm but unreadable. This was his chance to speak directly to the world, to set the record straight without tearing anyone else down. The leak had cost him millions, but the real damage was losing her. Backstage, he handed a folder to the host. Inside were proof documents showing who had leaked the contract and the donations he had arranged for the victims of the false reports. Make sure this is released after the event, he said. No names, no blame, just truth. The host nodded. Are you sure about this? You could save your image faster if you expose them? Adrian shook his head. The truth should heal, not humiliate. The lights dimmed. The auction began. Paintings, sculptures, rare wines, all sold at impossible prices. Then the final piece appeared on stage, a canvas painted in shades of gray and gold titled Love is a Contract. The audience murmured. It was the same piece Maya had given him months ago, back when everything was still pretend. The host announced, this final item was donated by Mr. Adrian Cole himself. All proceeds will go to media integrity programs and independent journalism. Adrian took the microphone. His voice was steady. When I first received this painting, it was just a gift between colleagues. But the woman who painted it reminded me that not everything written in ink should define what is real. Some contracts are meant to be rewritten by the heart. The room fell silent. Cameras flashed again, but this time the light felt softer. Tonight, every dollar from this piece will go to protecting truth, because real stories deserve to be heard without fear. The bidding began. Numbers climbed quickly, 50,000, 100,000, 200,000. Then a quiet voice from the back called 1,000,000. Every head turned. Maya stood there calm and poised in a simple black dress holding her paddle high. The crowd murmured, recognizing the woman from the headlines. Adrian's breath caught, but he did not move. The auctioneer's gavel came down. Sold. Applause filled the hall, but all Adrian could hear was the sound of his own heartbeat. When the crowd dispersed, Maya walked toward him slowly, the envelope of purchase papers in her hand. "You bought your own painting back," he said softly. "No," she said. "I bought it back for both of us." She looked up at him, eyes steady. "To remind you that some truths cannot be silenced no matter how expensive the lies become." He wanted to speak, but words felt too small. The noise of the crowd faded behind them, leaving only the quiet between two people who had finally learned the cost of honesty. In that moment, Maya realized something. Redemption was not an apology. It was action. And Adrian, for all his flaws, had finally understood that too. If you believe that love redeems best through truth, stay with me. Now let us return to her Maya Lee, the woman who once wrote the rules, now standing before the man who had broken them, to prove his heart was real. When the lights from the auction faded, the hall emptied slowly, leaving only echoes of conversation and the faint scent of champagne. Maya walked out to the balcony overlooking the city. The wind was cold against her skin, but her heartbeat was warmer than it had been in weeks. She held the envelope from the auction tightly in her hands, not because of its value, but because of what it represented: closure, honesty, and maybe something even deeper. Behind her, footsteps approached. She did not turn. She knew that rhythm too well. Adrian stopped a few feet away. "You should not be out here in this wind," he said quietly. She smiled faintly. "You still think you can tell me what to do?" "I am only suggesting," he replied. "You never listen anyway." She finally turned, the city lights reflecting in her eyes. "Maybe because you never stop giving orders." He laughed softly, the sound lighter than she remembered. "Fair enough." Silence stretched between them, filled with everything neither had said since she left. He looked at her, not like a man defending himself, but like someone seeing what he had almost lost. "You should not have had to fix what I broke," he said. Maya stepped closer. "You did not just fix it, Adrian. You changed it. You could have exposed the leak. You could have made me the villain, but you did not." He met her gaze. "Because you were never the villain. You were the reason I remembered who I was before the noise, before the power." Her eyes softened. "You always speak like every sentence is a closing statement. Maybe because I'm always afraid it will be the last one." For a moment, the world outside them blurred into quiet. Then she opened the envelope and pulled out the receipt from the auction. "You gave away the one thing that reminded you of me," she said. "And you bought it back," he replied, taking a step closer. "Why?" She looked at him, her voice steady. "To prove that love does not belong to one person. It is not owned, not negotiated, not signed away. It just exists whether we want it to or not." Adrian's eyes dropped to her hands. She held out the folded contract, the same document they had both signed months ago. "I came here tonight to end this," she said. "But then I realized something. Ending it would mean denying what it became." He looked up at her, his voice low. "What did it become?" She smiled through a tear. "Real." He took the contract from her, unfolding it carefully. Then without hesitation, he tore it down the middle. The paper split cleanly, falling between them. "No more terms," he said. "No more rules." Maya's breath caught. "You broke every one of them anyway." "And I would do it again," he said, his tone firm but full of warmth. They stood there in the glow of the city, two people who had built walls only to watch them crumble. The night was quiet except for the wind carrying away the last pieces of paper that once defined them. As the first drops of rain began to fall, he reached out his hand. She hesitated, then placed hers in his. The touch was steady, real, and without condition. "If you believe that love is not about rewriting rules but finally understanding them, stay with me." Now let us return to him, Adrian Cole, the millionaire who tore his own empire of pride apart to keep the only truth that ever mattered. The morning after the auction, the city was washed clean by rain. The sky stretched wide and pale, and for the first time in months it felt like peace had finally found its way back into both of their lives. Maya woke to the sound of quiet music drifting from the living room. She followed it still barefoot and found Adrian sitting by the piano. His fingers moved slowly across the keys, the melody soft and unpolished but honest. He looked up when he saw her. "You are awake," he said with a smile that carried both relief and something deeper. She leaned against the doorframe. "I did not know you played. I stopped for years," he admitted. "I forgot why I ever started. Then last night reminded me." "What did it remind you of?" she asked. He met her gaze. "That the best things in life do not need an audience. They just need truth." Maya walked closer and sat beside him on the piano bench. For a moment neither spoke. The quiet between them felt whole again, no longer heavy with what was broken. She looked at his hands on the keys and said softly, "So what now?" Adrian smiled. "No contracts, no rules, just us." She laughed gently. "That is not very businesslike of you." "I have done business my whole life," he said. "Maybe it is time I learned something different." Outside, the morning light spilled through the tall windows, brushing against the framed painting, now hanging in the center of the room, "Love is a contract." Beneath it was a small brass plate with new words engraved, "Written by rules, rewritten by love." Maya reached out and traced the edge of the frame with her fingertips. "You kept it," she said. "I kept everything that was real," he replied, "including you." For the first time, she did not look away. "You broke every rule I gave you, Adrian." He smiled, his voice low. "And you are still here." "Maybe because you taught me something," she said. "That control is not power, and forgiveness is not weakness." He reached for her hand. "And you taught me that love is not about ownership. It is about choosing someone even when you do not have to." Their hands intertwined, steady and certain. The world outside continued without them. Cars moving, people rushing. But inside that room, time stood still. Two people who had begun with ink and signatures had ended with silence and understanding. Weeks later, the scandal faded, replaced by the story of their foundation, the Cole-Lee Initiative for Truth and Integrity, a project dedicated to ethical journalism and transparency in business. Together, they built something that mattered not for publicity, but for purpose. One afternoon during an interview, a reporter asked Maya, "Do you believe love can really start from a contract?" She smiled thoughtfully. "No," she said, "but it can survive one." That evening, she found Adrian on the same balcony where everything had begun. The sunset painted the sky in gold. He turned toward her, that familiar quiet confidence in his eyes. "Still no rules?" she asked. He shook his head. "Only one." She tilted her head. "And what is that?" He stepped closer and whispered, "Never stop choosing each other." Maya smiled and kissed him, the city glowing beneath them like a promise kept. Because some stories do not end with signatures, they end with sincerity. And some contracts are never meant to expire. If you believe that true love does not follow rules, it simply rewrites them, then remember their story. Adrian Cole and Maya Lee, proof that even the richest man and the strongest woman can find forever once they learn to love without conditions.